American Heritage Series. America, this is your heritage.
You're citing the original intent. You're going back to original documents.
And that's not a reproduction from 1796. That is the original from 1796.
Okay.
That is it.
So you're going back to the original text, the original intent, with actual 200-and-something-year-old documents in your hand and reading us the philosophies for education.
That's right. We're going back and looking at, if you will, our first love, our first fruits, our first roots.
Yeah.
We're going back to what made us into what we are now. Now, here we are now, and we've forgotten what it was that made us who we are. We enjoy being who we are, but there's a reason we are who we are. There's a reason that we've been under the same piece of paper for more than 2 centuries, when nobody else in world history over the last 2 centuries has done that. There were ideas that were back there. We've forgotten the source of the ideas. We're enjoying what we have now, but we don't know the source. But it was that educational philosophy of religion, morality, and knowledge. And by the way, that knowledge, again, was not just a spiritual knowledge. You literally had a raised, elevated academic knowledge. And that's easy to prove by looking at their textbooks and looking at our textbooks. You take somebody with a bunch of PhDs after his name, one of our most educated folks in America, and you put him back in this little first-grade textbook. Now, this is the first textbook ever printed in America. This little jewel right here, printed in America in 1690, is called the New England Primer.
And you're holding an original.
Holding an original. And it's kind of interesting. It's small because, remember, you had to stick everything in a saddlebag to carry with you. So all books were small back then. I mean, just the mobility issue of getting to and from school for students. So this is what we call a first-grade textbook. When you started school in America for 240 years, this is the book where you learn to read. This is where you get your first lessons right here. This went from 1690 to 1930 as the textbook of American schools. It went through dozens and dozens of reprints, but this original textbook, and at the back it has 170 questions for first graders. Let me give you some of the first grade questions in American public schools for 240 years. Now, here's a bunch of questions on the 10 Commandments. What's the 5th commandment? What's the reason annexed to the 5th commandment? What's forbidden in the 5th commandment? So we got all the 10 Commandments questions in here. Here's questions. What offices does Christ execute as our Redeemer? What offices does Christ execute as our priest? What offices does Christ execute as our prophet? This is first grade stuff. One more first grade question. What are the benefits in this life which do flow from or accompany adoption, justification, and sanctification?
Oh my goodness.
First grade, 240 years, and we think we're so smart today. For centuries, American education included religious and moral principles within student instruction, and there's no question of the academic success of that philosophy. However, there have been great changes in recent years, efforts to completely secularize public education. The results have not been good. In fact, to verify the weakness of the current approach, simply look at the present condition of education. Since the court ordered a completely secular approach to public education in 1962, educational scores have plummeted, evidenced by the dramatic decline in college-bound student SAT scores. Furthermore, in recent international academic competitions, American high school students have regularly finished last, near the last, or in the bottom half of students in both math and science testing. In fact, in a recent international testing, although American elementary students performed above average and junior high students performed at average, American high school students finished at the bottom, thus prompting one critic to remark, "The longer U.S. students stay in school, the less they seem to know." Additionally, illiteracy has skyrocketed in America, evidenced by the fact that America now ranks a dismal 65th in the world in literacy among 200 nations, and a number of third world nations currently post higher literacy rates than the United States, whereas only a few decades ago, we had been the best. Illiteracy is so rampant that among recent high school graduates, 700,000 of them, after 12 years of public school, were unable to read their own diplomas. These are not the educational results that Americans had experienced under the former philosophy of education. In fact, it is the current decline and failure in the quality of public education, as evidenced through numerous measurements, that has produced a rapid rise in the popularity of and support for school choice. In fact, almost 24 states have now passed some form of educational choice, in order to give students a way to escape failing educational systems. The educational achievements of earlier generations stand in stark contrast to those of today, and numerous American students in those early years routinely achieved at an early age what today we consider extraordinary. For example, Declaration signer Charles Carroll entered college at the age of 10. Fisher Ames entered Harvard when he was 12 years old. And Benjamin Rush graduated from Princeton when he was only 14. And John Trumbull, a law student under John Adams and a justice on the Supreme Court of Connecticut, had already read through the Bible for the first time when he was 4 years old. When he was 6, he won a Greek contest against his local minister. And when he was 7.5 years old, he passed the entrance exam to Yale University. But his parents decided to hold him out until he was 13 so that he could attend college with his peers. There are many similar examples. And while entering a university at 13 or 14 seems a young age to us today, it was not then. And the academics were harder then than they are now. Consider some other examples. Andrew Jackson, who later became a U.S. president, was only 12 years old when, as a soldier in the American Revolution, he was captured and made a prisoner of war by the British. And when John Quincy Adams was 8 years old, he performed musket drills during the Revolution with the famous Massachusetts Minutemen. When he was 14, he received a congressional diplomatic appointment overseas as secretary to the ambassador at the court of Catherine the Great in Russia. And when Constitution signer William Livingston was 14, he moved in among the Mohawk Indians to live as a missionary. And James Iredell, a justice placed on the Supreme Court by George Washington, was appointed to public office in North Carolina to oversee financial matters when he was 17 years old. This is almost unimaginable today, but such accounts simply were not that unusual under the American educational system at that time. This was the first spelling book introduced in America, introduced in 1782 by Noah Webster. It became known as Webster's Blueback Speller. You can see the cover. This is 1908 version. So here's a 1908 elementary, it says, elementary spelling book right here, right? Elementary. Let's try a few elementary spelling words. Here you go. Contumelious, ichthyology, bronchotomy, eschatology, loquacious, rapacious, sagacious. Elementary spelling words for 150 years in our school. See, the fear of the Lord is the beginning of knowledge. Wow. We literally go up with knowledge. There is a reason that when the court in 1962-63 said, oh, no more fear of God in schools, no more prayer, no more Bible, there's a reason that according to Department of Education stats, the SAT scores dropped. I mean dropped decades in a row. There's a reason that we're no longer number one in the world in academic areas. There's a reason that instead of being number one in the world in literacy, we're now number 62 in the world in illiteracy. I mean, we had a recent year where we graduated 700,000 students from high school who could not read their own diploma, and that's after 13 years of school, after almost $10,000 a year we're putting in education, they can't read their own diploma. It's the philosophy of education. They had a philosophy, we used it for 170 years. We've had a philosophy we've used for 30 years. There's fruit from both sides. Sure. There's no question that that philosophy of education that said religion, morality, and knowledge is the basis of learning has been much more successful than the ones that we've adopted today.
For more information on the American Heritage Series or to find books and other resources, visit wallbuilders.com. Through the American Heritage Series, renowned historian David Barton communicates our nation's forgotten, godly foundations and encourages us to once again view history through a truthful lens. For only when we recognize and embrace God's hand in our history can America become all that it was intended to be. Through Wall Builders, historian David Barton seeks to rebuild the walls of America's unique religious, moral, and constitutional heritage by educating the public and encouraging people of faith to become active in strengthening America's great foundations. For more information on how you can become involved, visit wallbuilders.com.